Whenever I think about Glee, I just remember that time I almost hit Chris Colfer with my car. Okay, so this week's discussion topic is about Glee, in terms of representation and all that jazz. Other college Quiltbag members aren't big fans of it, and to be completely honest, I don't watch as much Glee as I should. But I watch television. I love television, so let's go with that. For me, when I was in the process of understanding my sexuality and all of that, television played a big role. I remember watching the L Word on mute, slamming my computer shut as soon as I heard something of a stir. But yeah, like watching television, seeing queer characters in shows can either be really big help or, can really actually hurt things in the process, depending on the kind of representation. For me, when I turned to the L Word, for example, I felt like an outcast. I was not like any of the lesbians on that show. And growing up on a bunch of military bases, and at the time, living in the middle of Virginia, I had very little exposure to lesbianness, right? So my understanding of it from the L Word was that, lesbians are this particular way. This is the right way to be a lesbian. And I wasn't like that, so I was ostracized. I just didn't fit in, and I didn't know how to accept myself in that way. So when it comes to Glee, when the show first came out, there was a lot of celebration because there was this really prominent gay character in Kurt, but there was also a bit of a backlash, right? Because Kurt, in many ways, is, very much the stereotype. And a lot of people were thinking, well, this is bad. This is just perpetuating stereotypes. I understand that interpretation of it. However, television is all about representation, and especially a show like Glee, which is basically a satire. It's going to rely on a lot of archetypes, right? So a lot of characters who are just based on very basic characteristics that are blown up for comedy's sake. And on top of that, a medium like television, film, it's all about saying as much as you can in as few words as possible. So you're going to rely on visual cues or sonic cues. And, the bottom line is, even though he is very much a stereotype, there are queers like that out there who are very much like Kurt. So it wasn't that bothered me. It was that having a token character is a really tricky thing to pull off, especially if you're trying to prove yourself to be a very progressive show, relying on token characters and stereotypes and things like that, and having one representation of a queer character isn't all that progressive. Because the true nature of being progressive isn't just to, include an other character just for the sake of showing diversity, not just for the sake of filling a quota, but by showing, the wide range of the different individuals that exist in the queer community. And so when they introduced Blaine, that was a really great step, in my opinion, because he isn't like Kurt in any way, really, except that he's gay. And unlike shows like on Will and Grace, for example, they had Jack, who was hilarious. Everybody loves Jack, right? But he was the butt of a joke. And Will, on the other hand, because he was so straight acting, I've read a few articles about it that say that Will was just a straight guy who happened to be gay. And he himself actually constantly chastised Jack for his behavior. So the difference between Glee and Will and Grace, I feel, is that in Will and Grace, there's almost this divide where they create this new binary, right? Like there's a right way to be gay and there's a wrong way to be gay. But in Glee, they exist harmoniously, almost literally, because they're in a relationship together, right? So that depiction of the gay community is, really positive in my opinion. To return, though, to the representation of lesbianism, right, because it's Lesbian Friday, the Santana storyline, I wasn't sure how to feel about it, to be completely honest. That whole thing just kind of came out of left field for me. I mean, again, it's a show that's supposed to be satire, right? So when the show hinted at, like, their friends with benefits kind of relationship, it was always in a joking light, right? Like, there were these typical cheerleader chicks who, experiment with lesbianism just for the sake of doing it. But, that said, I think the way that they're handling Santana's character is interesting. If you look at it this way, Santana's character is nothing new, right? Like, the reason she's a cheerleader, a gay cheerleader, is because that's the kind of kid in high school you would least expect to be gay, right? So there's that shock value, there's that whole twist thing going on, there's a lot at stake. That's why they chose Santana to be gay. That said, it all goes back to the L word situation, the idea of representing, a wide range of queerness. The reason the characters on the L word, for example, were mostly femme, except for Shane, who, arguably is still pretty femme. It's because the networks are trying to appeal to a male audience too, right? There is this standard of beauty. People only want to look at individuals of a certain way. So the difference between Santana and Kurt, I would argue, is that Kurt's character is a character that's existed for decades, right? Like, it's a character we've definitely seen before. It's just this very flamboyant character. And it's okay for him to exist in that way because he's not supposed to be sexualized in any way. And Santana, on the other hand, throwing in her female identity into the mix, there is that double standard in the way that the show can depict a female character. Like, we have not seen, an all-out butch dyke lesbian character on television. Not that they have to be butch dyke, it's just that if they exist in the same space, then the message would be all the more powerful. So it's not so much that I have a problem with the characters themselves, like Santana independently, but, there are different queer kids out there, not even just queer kids, even straight girls who just, aren't that brand of femininity, who long to be represented. I mean, we're human. Like, as much as we want to say, that we're independent, that we can be ourselves and we don't need confirmation from other sources, seeing someone we can relate to in such a powerful medium like television is really affirming. And to miss that point, to only represent, one kind of lesbian character isn't really helping anybody all that much. So again, like, I respect Santana as a character. I just wish there were other lesbian characters who could help stir the pot. So when you turn to other sources, when you're trying to understand your sexuality, when you're trying to accept yourself, when you're so hungry for seeing other lesbians, being exposed to lesbianism in a certain way, you just have to be sure that you take the images that are out there with a grain of salt. Because the truth is, queerness is a unique experience to everybody. It's important to remember, just be your own lesbian. I mean, it's cool to see diversity on television for sure, and Glee has the best intentions. So just know that, you don't have to fit in. It's just about being yourself, and people will love you all the more for it, for sure. So don't feel left out. There's hope for us yet to be seen. I'm crossing my fingers for a nerdy, frumpy lesbian on Glee. So yeah, just be yourself, friends.